right. Thanks everyone for joining. Super happy to have Mary Maller with us today. She's a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, and prior to that, she was a grad student at UCL. And today she'll talk about distributed key generation and how to make it efficient. Take it away.
Thanks for the introduction. Okay, can everybody see this okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So today I'm going to be presenting a fairly specific piece of work, which we called Aggregatable Distributed Key Generation. And this was a collaborative project with lots of different people from lots of different institutions. As I go, feel free to ask questions or tell me I'm going too slow, tell me I'm going too fast, interrupt and all the rest of it. That's absolutely fine. What level should I assume that most people are at? Have most people heard of DKGs before, or are they something that would be a new concept?
Probably most have heard of DKG. We're using that in the system. So you can assume, I guess, basic familiarity.
Okay, in which case I will, well, I'll give the overview of contributions, but then when I'm starting to talk about what is a DKG, I'll just flick past that part. So what we do is we construct a new DKG, which is publicly verifiable. It's pretty efficient. It doesn't have any complaints around, and a fairly unique property about it is that it's aggregatable. And this basically means that everybody's contributions to the full DKG can be mushed together such that they're smaller, easier to verify, easier to communicate. When we're generating our DKG, we actually come up with something which doesn't give us field elements, but group elements. And this is a little bit annoying, it's a downside. But we do manage to show that there's still a lot you can do with being able to show a group element. In particular, you absolutely can get a verifiable unique function, which means you can get a verifiable random function, which means that you can get a random beacon. During the way, we use some new definitions, which are weaker conditions than those which were previously used, but much easier to achieve. And we at least think that they're fairly intuitive, that they get across what a DKG is supposed to do. And sort of hand in hand with our new definitions, we also use some new proving techniques, which, despite the fact that we're using the random oracle model, we're not doing any rewinding, which is a technique that cryptographers often use when trying to prove things secure in the random oracle model. But it can be very complicated to argue about how things compose concurrently when you start arguing about what happens when you rewind the adversary. But because we're not rewinding the adversary like at all, it means we basically don't need to worry about what additional attacks could happen if you have a concurrent adversary, because there are none. What we don't do, however, is techniques as they stand don't apply to Schnorr signatures. If that slide, I am going to skip. And this one. This one I'm almost going to skip, apart from I want to sort of generally get across that if you're using the technique to use a DKG in order to generate a unique threshold signature, this is equivalent to what we're doing. We're using a DKG to generate a verifiable unique function, and this is in essence a unique threshold signature. It's the same idea. And you could use our VUF for signing if you wanted to. It's just that we were very precise about how you derive the unique component from the signature. Can we skip this? No, this cannot be skipped. It can nearly be skipped. I want to give credit to the authors of Scrape. So our DKG, what we're essentially doing is we're running n parallel instances of the Scrape publicly verifiable secret sharing scheme. We can't run it directly as is because where the scheme is aggregatable, that also means it's sort of very, well, malleable. You might be able to use someone's Pvss to cancel out shares from your Pvss. And so what we need to do is, in addition to giving out the Pvss and the DKG, we also need to provide basically a proof of knowledge to say, look, I actually know my contribution, which I'm contributing to this DKG. The contribution part, that does not get aggregated, but it's fine because it's very small. It's like, I think, 2 group elements. But the big transcript, which contains all of the encryptions of everybody's shares, those parts you can aggregate. And this matters because they are linear sized. So linear in the number of participants. When we're defining what we think it means to be a DKG, many previous works assumed that a DKG should be simulatable. And this basically means that the adversary has no control whatsoever over the output. They can behave in any adversarial way they like, but if they can control the output, even by changing a single bit, then they're able to break some hard computational problem. The problem with this as a definition is that it's actually very challenging to achieve when an adversary can play last. So basically, if I'm a malicious party and I want to mess with things, if I always am the last contribution to the full DKG, then I can always change my contribution such that, let's say, the first bit of the public key is 0. This is something I can do. So if you want to prevent adversaries from doing this, then you can add in an additional round and make sure that people are committed to what they're contributing, but then you have to worry about what if they abort and make sure that they actually have given enough information for everyone else and such that they can contribute. And you essentially end up having to do a threshold scheme as part of your DKG. And we thought that this wasn't really strictly necessary, because when you're generating a DKG, what you're aiming to do is not to produce a random value. That might be your ultimate aim, but it's not your initial aim. Your initial aim is just to produce a public key. You might want your public key for a unique threshold scheme. You might want it for an encryption scheme. You might want it for a signature scheme. But if you want it, for example, for a signature scheme, then all you really care about is that an adversary can't sign with respect to the public key which the DKG outputs. You don't necessarily care if they can make the public key equal to 0 or 1 on the first bit. So to try and capture this notion, we basically define a DKG to be a scheme where breaking the security of the scheme implemented with a DKG, threshold scheme implemented with a DKG, directly implies breaking the security of the non-threshold scheme with a normal key generation process. So this does mean that there are an additional couple of steps in proving, because you're not going to be able to say, here's one security proof to rule them all. You do actually then need to show that your security goes through with respect to your specific scheme. But if you're careful about how you formulate how you prove your DKG, and in particular, what we come up with is an idea called key expressibility, you can reuse a lot of that work. You don't have to do every single step from scratch.
Mary, I know we skipped some of the stuff, but then I realized that we're recording the talk and we'll make it kind of public. Does it make sense to say maybe like just a couple more words about like the setting of DKG and like what are you trying to do a little bit, and maybe like go a little bit deeper about its like relation with the signatures as well?
Sorry, I was going too deep, too fast, clearly. I shall flick back a few slides then.
We do have some non-theorists in the audience who might appreciate just some refresher on some terminology and stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, thank you.
Okay, a DKG is basically where you have some kind of public key cryptography scheme, which uses both a public key and a secret key. So your public key, everybody knows, it's public. You want to perform some operation with respect to it. The operation which you're performing, you should only be able to do if you know the corresponding secret key. So this might be decryption, or it might be signing. Those are the two classic examples in cryptography, or it might be something else. So when we say a distributed key generation algorithm, what we really mean is a trusted setup algorithm to generate that public key. Because obviously, if you want people to know the secret key, you can't just choose a random element and say, that's my public key, because then nobody would know the secret key and you wouldn't be able to do the operations that you need to do. And therefore, the public key that you have would essentially be useless to you in some kind of threshold scheme. And by threshold, I mean that you have, in order to perform the operation, you want 10 people, let's say, to take part in signing, rather than just one person in order to distribute the trust. So here, what you'd have is you'd have 10 people jointly generating the public key such that none of them know the secret key. And then if they want to then use the secret key, let's say at least 5 of them would need to agree that this is an operation which they want to do with respect to these inputs in order to generate that signature. Or it could be that you want all 10 of them to participate, but you can have a 5 out of 10 to participate, or a 2 out of 3, or a 7 out of 12, or you name it, you can choose. The two big settings where people do typically want it are encryption and signatures. So with encryption, this would basically be talking about decrypting a database which is in some way sensitive. And maybe you don't just want one employee at the company to be able to download all of the people's personal data, but you might still need to access it in order to actually, I don't know, determine what pensions these people are required, if you're required to pay these people or whatever. So in this setting, you might say, okay, you can access, but only if 2 out of 5 of you choose to participate. Likewise with signatures, this would be talking about the most classic example where you'd use a threshold signature would be for some kind of financial system where maybe you want to be able to store your cryptocurrency funds, for example, on a public server because you don't trust yourself. What if you lose the hardware? What if you break something? But you don't necessarily want to trust a single trusted third party with your key because then they would be able to steal all your money. So what you might instead do is you might say, okay, I'm going to trust, let's say, 100 different people, but at least this many of them need to sign in order to recover that, in order to recover these funds, in order to sign a transaction. The setting, which is sort of fairly popular at the moment as well, is where you want the signature scheme, which people are generating, to be unique. And this basically means that for any message, if you sign it, then that is the one and only signature which will verify with respect to that message. And these are pretty useful for randomness beacons because it basically means that you can sort of say, here's a message to be signed. You all agree on the message to be signed. And then you can jointly generate that signature afterwards. If a couple of people go offline or don't participate in it, you can still generate the signature because enough people are taking part. Nobody's going to be able to guess what that signature is before you start the signing process, not unless they've corrupted a majority of people. And then at the end, you have this unique signature, which when you then hash it, that would be a random value. And it would be a random value which would be very difficult to influence in the sense that maybe you go offline, but the random value is still output because nobody else goes offline. Is that sufficient of the background or should I continue?
Yep,
I think we're
I
good.
think that was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So I was talking about defining what it even means for DKG to be secure. In the specific example of a threshold signature scheme, what it would mean is that whenever I can forge a threshold signature, somebody else is able to forge a normal signature with respect to the same signing scheme. So one of the properties about our DKG, which we're really sort of proud of, pleased with, is that we don't have any complaints rounds. This is also a property which the Dfinity people managed to achieve in their fairly recently released DKG. And they basically refer to this property as being a non-interactive DKG. You send your message and you're done. No further interaction occurs. This is not what would typically be done for previous schemes in the literature. And in particular, if you're talking about, for example, the Pvss DKG or the Generatel DKG, you would have a complaints round. This basically means that in the first round, everybody is going to generate their contribution to the final public and secret keys. That's round one. Then everybody is going to broadcast their contribution to the public key. But they're not going to be able to broadcast people's contributions to the secret keys, basically because it's very hard to know whether that contribution actually contains a secret key or not without decrypting. So instead, what they do is they privately send the secret key shares to the other people using some kind of symmetric encryption scheme. And then parties have to monitor to check that they have actually received the values they were supposed to receive from other parties. So if the first party goes offline and doesn't send anything at all to the second party, then it is up to the second party to do something about this. And namely, what they have to do is they have to complain. They have to broadcast to all of the other participants that they did not receive anything from the first party. And if it is the case that they don't do this, then it could be the case that the first party actually cheated and is able to do the operation that they're not supposed to be able to do by themselves, all by themselves in the final scheme. So it is actually pretty important that you do complain. So this causes a few problems. I wouldn't say they are like problems which you can't get around, because obviously people do implement these things in practice and they do get around them, but they're not necessarily nice solutions. So for a start, you have a very inflexible communication structure. You genuinely do need it to be the case that everybody in the system is able to communicate directly with everybody else. You also have a very large attack surface. There's lots of different communication going on at lots of different points in time, all of which are places where things could go wrong. You also have a very long delay between rounds. And this is basically because if you're trying to run this protocol over the internet, then it's entirely plausible that the first party's message might take a while to reach the second party's message. So you have to allow for enough time for that message to actually reach them. And then you have to allow for enough time for the second party to complain. You also have it such that if some party momentarily goes offline, then that's it. They're out of the system forevermore. They can't rejoin, because someone will complain about them if they've not sent the relevant things, or they won't be able to recover their secret key such that they can take part in the threshold operations at the end of it. So it really is important that parties stay online the whole time with this sort of structure. So what our DKG suggests doing instead is that we're going to generate a contribution to the public and secret keys, same as before. We're also going to broadcast the contribution to the public key. But rather than sort of privately sending the encryptions to the secret keys, we're going to publicly broadcast these encryptions to the secret keys. Okay? But we also provide a proof, which I've not mentioned on my slide, that these encryptions have been generated correctly. Our proofs are pretty simple. They're like one group element in order to check each encryption. And this was the main challenge that Dfinity had when doing the same structure, by the way. They were targeting BLS, and they were trying to make it so that you could encrypt field elements. Encrypting field elements is pretty challenging using, well, group-based cryptography, I should say, or discrete log or bilinear pairings, because your main public key encryption scheme is Algamail, and this has pretty slow decryption unless your messages are small. So what Dfinity essentially has to do is they have to both generate messages which are small and then prove that their messages are suitably small such that people can decrypt. And this prover, and they find a way to do it a little bit more efficient, well, a lot more efficiently. They find a way to make it such that you actually can prove this in a reasonable amount of time. But this is not something that we have to worry about at all, because what we're decrypting is a group element. It is not a field element. So decryption is just standard Algamail decryption. We don't have to then compute discrete log. We don't have to worry about things going out of range, being too big. We don't need to worry about the number of contributions, which can be added to a single thing before that message gets too large to decrypt. All of that complexity goes out the window. But we do pay for it in the sense that at the end, what we have is a group element. It's not a field element. And this is sort of why we can't cover BLS.
Do you have a sense of kind of what are the overheads that they had to pay to generate those proofs? They're not that large, right? Like what, maybe a few milliseconds, a few dozen milliseconds per proof?
I don't have a good feeling for it. I think it would be better to ask the Office of that work, really. I should have a better answer to this, but I don't. Sorry. So if the first party was to send bad encryptions in this kind of setup, then everybody will know. It's not going to be that you can do that and get away with it, because they just run the verifier. The verifier says no, then you can tell that that's a bad share. And this includes parties who are not even involved in the DKG. So you could have a third party person come in who would be able to check that everybody has behaved honestly, even though they know none of the secrets behind the system. And a second unique property we get from this kind of structure is that our DKG is aggregatable. So when we have to encrypt every single secret individually, this means that you end up with fairly large messages. And each of these messages eventually need to reach every single party such that they're able to recover their personal share of the secret such that they're able to perform the operation. With our setup though, we don't actually need it such that everybody needs to see everybody else's decryption in order to be able to recover their share, because our messages can be aggregated. So if one party sends me a share M1 and another party sends me a share M2, I only actually need one DKG transcript in order to recover M1 plus M2, which is the value that I'm actually interested in. This basically means that even though we have messages which are linear in size, the total amount of messages which would need to be like broadcasted is far, far lower than most other schemes in the literature. So in terms of like actual concrete size, it already makes a difference, but once you consider the communication structure on top of it, the agreement protocol, which would need to happen either in synchrony or asynchrony or whatever system you want, we think that ours is going to be much more flexible in terms of just keeping that message size down.
Do you have to pass the identities of the folks that you aggregate?
Yes, you do. So you need to, while we're aggregating the encryptions, we're not aggregating the signatures. So if I contribute to the DKG, then I'll say, this is my contribution, my share of the public key. Here's a signature that I know my contribution, and here's also a signature that this contribution comes from me and not from somebody else. And that you can't aggregate, that you do need to check for each individual person, but it is just a signature. It's not anything more than that. What I'm saying here is that it's the encryptions themselves, the things that contain the information which needs to be recovered from the other parties, which forms these really long messages. Those parts you can aggregate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I guess you could still use, BLS signatures, right, to aggregate the signatures and then only keep the IDs.
Yes, you can. But if you did it like that, you need to make sure that you would need to make sure of some other technicalities, like you need to make sure that everybody provides a proof of knowledge when they first register. That's not a big deal. And you'd need to make sure that the messages, everyone agrees on which message is coming from which party, such that you can be sure that that signature is the actual signature that they want to. But yeah, you can. I don't know why I'm saying it as if it would be a bad thing to do. It would be a good thing to do. So when you're aggregating BLS signatures, one thing which can be a little bit annoying is that the order of aggregation, this wouldn't be true for BLS, I'll move on to that for the next slide. The order in which we aggregate things is not important. If you want to aggregate things all in one go, because maybe you have some leader who takes in everybody's messages and aggregates them all up and then sends everybody the aggregated message to everyone else, you can do that. But if you want to partially aggregate as you go in order to make sort of the individual operations parallelizable or more efficient or shared between more parties, then this is also something which you could do exactly the same. One other thing which we can do is we can gossip them. And this gossip is actually sort of really nice compared to BLS because we can aggregate the same message more than once. So if you want it to be the case that you aggregate the first message with the third message, let's say, and then you aggregate the aggregated first message with the first message again, that wouldn't be a problem because we're not worried about things going outside of the field because everything is a group element anyway. All we're really worried about is, do we have the signature from the individual person? Those don't get aggregated, so that's fine. And are we able to decrypt? So when I say order is unimportant, I really do mean order is unimportant. So we do have an implementation as well, thanks to Kobi, which is open source. You can find it on GitHub. We didn't implement the gossip protocol, but we did implement the DKG dealer and the DKG verifier. And we did this for up to 8,000 participants. How the concrete numbers that we get at the moment is using just standard BLS signatures. We're not aggregating those BLS signatures, and we're not using Schnorr signatures, which would also be an option, which would also be a little bit faster. The reason for this is mostly because I was being a bit wanting my security proof to be pretty, and it's easier to make it pretty with BLS signatures than Schnorr signatures. I won't get into that. But if you wanted to get these numbers, concrete numbers down just a little bit further, you're not going to get them more efficient than Scrape. That is like really a lower bound, but you might get them faster than they currently are. Any questions on this? Oh, should continue. How am I doing for time, by the way?
I think we're good. Still got another 25 minutes or so.
Awesome. So I've mentioned before that the big downside is that our secrets are group elements rather than field elements. So you're not going to be able to use DKG for BLS signatures, and you're not going to be able to use it for algorithm encryption. We can use it for random beacon applications. And in particular, we generate a new unique threshold signature scheme where the where the secret key is a group element rather than a field element. So it works directly with our DKG. Basically, what our VUF looks like is pretty similar to BLS signatures. So with a BLS signature, what you'd be saying is, I want you to prove that you know some X such that pk equals g to the x. And the way you do this is you hash the message, and then you compute the hashed message to the power of x, and then you use a bilinear pairing in order to check that the pairing of the public key with the hash of the message is equal to the pairing of just a generator with the signature. So this requires knowledge of x. We can't do this, but what we can give is we can give knowledge of a second generator, h, to the power of x. And this would be in a type 3 bilinear group. So we have that the first source group is not equal to the second source group, which most pairings which are used in modern systems are like this because they're more efficient that way. So our VOF, the output that we are interested in is the pairing of the hashed message with the secret key, which is equal to E of hash of m h to the power of x. And notice here that that hashed message is lying in the same group as the public key. So the reason this is secure is pretty similar to the reason why the BLS signature is secure. Pretty much all of the same properties that you have for BLS would apply for us as well. We want groups with pairings. We want knowledge of secret key proofs when you register into the system. Well, this wouldn't be so important with the DKG actually, because the DKG essentially provides that purpose. But if you were using it as a standalone, then that would matter. You can aggregate it in the same way that you can aggregate a BLS signature. Almost everything is the same, but there are sort of some small details which are different, which I will sort of dwell on a little bit. So the output of the DKG is equal to this, this value. Actually, how the signature part of the VUF, so the bit that each party is contributing, consists of group elements, which you can then pair together in a unique way such that you get this unique output. And we also need to provide in that in those signature elements a proof that this output is actually correct, is actually what it's supposed to be, because the verifier can't check that for themselves because they don't know h to the x and they don't know hash of m to the x. So all they have to go on is a proof, but a proof is like, well, computationally sound. So they should be happy with that. So concretely, our proof size consists of 2 group elements, and our verifier computation is 3 pairings. This is compared to BLS, where you have 1 group element and 2 pairings. But we also, if we're wanting to derive a unique value, need to do an additional computation on top of that, which would be an additional 3 pairings. So if you're thinking about it in terms of generating your signature, this is verifying everyone's partial signatures. That's all going to be 3 pairings. That is something where you don't need to bother deriving the unique value from because it's sort of less important. But then once you've aggregated them up, you've done your secret sharing, reconstructed, get back your signature. That signature, you would then need to do an additional 3 pairings in order to compute the VUF output. When I say we have 2 group elements, this is in an optimized version of our VUF, which basically has an additional part after you've generated the full public key, where everybody gives out some partial parts of their public key, and you then verify those. And this is a one-time operation which you can do, and once you do it, you don't need to do it again. If you don't go to the effort of doing that, then we can still run our VUF, but it's a little bit more expensive. And the relative numbers are shown in the left-hand column of this table. So the first column is just our VUF, unoptimized, not doing what we call not doing key verification or key proving. The second column is our optimized VUF, the one we actually imagine people using because it is quite a lot more efficient. But again, in this situation, you do need to have a one-off cost to prove that your personal public key is correct and prove that your personal and then verify all the personal public keys. But in the second column, yeah, we end up being approximately twice as expensive as BLS. Obviously, there's actually, before I move on, are there any questions? I'm going to take it back. Good. Obviously, there's still a lot of settings where you might want to use BLS or you might want to use Algamal. And in this setting, you still would probably want to use the new system of Definity, which sort of came after our work, so I haven't evaluated it as much. But the other thing you might want to use is you might want to use the Pvss DKG. And this does have the complaints round, so you're still going to have to go through the effort of saying, if you don't send me my secret key share, then I complain against you, and then you have to either broadcast it for everybody or you're going to be discounted from the system. You still have to do all that. But if you want to do that, then we show that you can use the Pvss DKG as it is for specific applications, including BLS signatures and including Algamal encryption. Not including Schnorr signatures. If you want to use Schnorr signatures with a Pvss DKG, then you need to go to more effort and use something like Frost, because there are actually attacks if you were to use the scheme as is, and the attacks do come up in the security proof. By the way, you wouldn't be able to prove Schnorr secure using our techniques.
What about like ECDSA?
Yeah, ECDSA is much more challenging actually in order to generate a DKG for sharing the secret keys. There's a lot of work on it because of course people want backwards compatibility, but usually they end up full on using class groups or Palier encryptions or something like that, because they need a homomorphic structure in their sharing. So I don't know whether our techniques would apply directly, although it would be worth a try. It's not something we've looked into, but certainly it's more complicated than either Schnorr or BLS or Algamal.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yep. So yeah, we're able to prove security of the Pvss DKG for BLS, and this, considering Schnorr is not secure, we thought was sort of actually quite an important gap in the literature, because like you look at it and you think, oh, but the specific things that apply to Schnorr, they don't really apply here because we don't have this sort of 2-round send something off hash and then send something back. But actually, like, proving that, I think, is something which provides some level of reassurance, because it would be like a bit annoying if everyone was there like, okay, it's fine to use this for BLS, but not for Schnorr. And then there was an attack and it was something which could have been foreseen. Here we show that there should be no, I mean, I can't say that nobody will ever break discrete log, and I can't say that nobody will ever break SXDH, but assuming that the assumptions are sound, you should be fine to use BLS. Okay, so I'm
actually sorry, I had another question actually. So, yeah. But the Schnorr versus ECDSA key generation is pretty much identical, right? Like you are generating keys in the same format. So when you say, I guess, yeah, your results wouldn't extend, is it because of like all the signing that goes into this ECDSA?
So the keys look pretty similar, but the signature algorithm is designed deliberately to be very different, right, I believe. Right. Like they didn't want it to look too much like Schnorr because they wanted to get around the patent. And I think in particular, one thing which they need to do at some point in the protocol is they need to compute inverses. Mm-hmm. And this is something where they're not able to do just a direct linear addition of all of the shares. Like they have to go do more complicated multi-party computation in order to make sure that that's been computed correctly. So there's just a lot more steps. So without actually going through it and evaluating it, I wouldn't like to say that this definitely works for that more complicated setting.
Okay.
Sorry, that might not have been the answer you wanted.
Mm-hmm. No, it's fine. But this is primarily because like your GKG kind of algorithms, you don't prove properties about the GKG itself, right? You want to prove the property that like the signature is unforgeable. Because if you could prove things about GKG and sort of plug it in, then you could plug it in with probably like Schnorr or ECDSA if GKG itself had strong properties. But that's not what you've proven. You've proven that the result of these algorithms are unforgeable signatures that look like this, and therefore you have to go through the whole proof and how it looks like in signing.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, we don't have to go through the whole proof. In particular, what we're able to do is we're able to say, with this style of DKG, at the end of it, there is a simulator, a reduction, an extractor, whatever you want to call them, who is able to compute a very special form of the secret key relating to the public key, such that, I mean, for example, say they're given as input PK1. At the end of it, the output of the DKG is, say, PK1 plus PK2. Then they're still not going to know the secret key element behind PK1, but they'd be able to extract SK2, secret key 2, that corresponds to PK2, okay? So being able to relate their sort of public key challenge to the output of the DKG like this means that when you're then proving BLS secure, all you need to do is you need to say, I can use this special form in order to A, generate the honest shares of the signatures. When you ask for honest shares of the signatures, this is the reduction. And B, generate a forgery for PK1, my challenge public key, whenever you generate a forgery for PK1 plus PK2. So proving that you're able to extract that special form from the DKG, that proof can be reused over and over and over again, and we call that key expressibility. But then doing the extra step of saying, okay, this actually suffices to get security for my specific scheme, that needs to be done scheme by scheme.
Makes sense. Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. So for threshold ECDSA, if it was the case that this special form is enough for you to generate a forgery for standard ECDSA, whenever an adversary generates a false proof for threshold ECDSA, then that would imply security. But that would be the step that you would need to do. It might work. It might not. I'm not sure.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so just to wrap up, our DKG is publicly verifiable, aggregatable, and does not have complaints rounds. We can use gossip communication to reduce the total communication, if that's the structure that you would like to use. We can build random beacons using our DKG and our VUF. And our proofing techniques are highly applicable to other schemes. They're not just not only useful for our scheme.